as you know, Sam, I wasn't able to film last week because certain things had happened in my family and we had lost a member of the family. He had passed very suddenly and it was a bit of a shock. Now, this all happened on the mainland. I was not personally involved with it, but on the day of the funeral, I took myself off to Newchurch, one of my favourite churches on the Isle of Wight, and I thought I would just sit there, say my prayers, ask for peace and solitude, and just be with the family that is suffering in my spirit. And so I sat there quietly, and I went into the Bamford Chapel, which is where Francis Bamford used to speak to Margot and I all those years ago. And there's a lovely window in there, and it's a three-piece stained glass window with St Francis of Assisi. And Francis Bamford was very close to nature, and underneath it's got, this window is in memory of Francis Bamford. So there's Francis of Assisi and there is Francis Bamford, both in this window. And I'm sitting there looking at it and thinking, I hope you're with me, Francis. Oh, this family do need help. And I said, I'd like a sign today, please. I'd really like a sign that my thoughts are going where they're supposed to be going. So then I thought, well, I'll just walk around the churchyard. It's a beautiful churchyard. And so I wandered around the churchyard and I found the grave of Francis Bamford. And it was all covered with ivy. And I just knelt down by this grave and I pulled all this ivy off it so that I could see his name and his wife's name and his son's name, who had died at 37 in Perth in Australia. And I'm just thinking about the work that I'd done with Margot and all the magic that goes on in my life. And I thought, I do need a sign today. Anyway, I came home, and about 6 o'clock, my grandson, Aidan, FaceTimed me, and he's now back at university in Portsmouth. And he said, Grandma, he said, I just thought I'd like to talk to you. So we're chatting away, and I said to him, Aidan, do you remember when you were very young and you went to your first film? Yes, he said, it was called Spider-Man. He said, I was 4 years old. And I said, do you remember what happened when you came home? Yes, he said, I do. He said, there was a crop circle in Mum's field. Now, I must tell you about Mum's field, because when Zoe first went to Warminster, and this was before she ever moved there, she was going past this field and she suddenly said, that's my field. That's my field. She said, I had no idea how I knew it was my field, but it was, and it is. So that was that. So I said to him, do you remember saying to your dad, what's the language of the aliens? I do, he said, and my dad said, I haven't got a clue. And Aidan said to him, yes, you do, Dad. It's crop circle language. Now, this child is 4.5. It's crop circle language. That was that. We finished the conversation. And I went upstairs and I thought, I'll take my book down and read my book. So I picked up my book and my glasses and came downstairs. And I thought, that's not my book. And I'd picked up this book by mistake. The Convoluted Universe by Dolores Cannon. And I just opened it. And it opened at this page here. And I thought, no, I don't believe this. On it, I have written I don't know whether you can see it, but I have written Aidan by the side. There. And this is Dolores Cannon doing a regression. She'd done a regression on somebody, and this is what the ETs have told her through the regressions that she's done. The ETs have told me that the crop circle symbols contain blocks of information. The observer doesn't have to be inside the circles to receive this. Just seeing the symbol in a magazine, newspaper, etc. is enough to download the information. They have reported various other ways that the download occurs. They have said it is their language. Aidan. He had told his daddy that the crop circles are the language of the aliens at 4.5. And on the bottom there, I had written, Aidan asked Kev about the language of ETs, and Kev said he didn't know, to which Aidan replied, yes you do, it is crop circle language. That was my synchronicity, my magic for the day. So I knew that the young man that I had been praying for was happy and all right, because when the universe speaks to me like that, and that is the way the universe speaks to me, through synchronicity, and it is very obvious. And it just so happened that I happened to be speaking about the starmen last time, and this is what I was saying to Aidan. I think that's wonderful, and I just love it. It's happened so often in my life, and I'm always so surprised, but it just happens. Anyway, I have got some more stories for you today, and I thought I would read you a little more about the starmen who Margot who had the people who had seen, or the spirits who had seen during their lifetime, seen UFOs. But before I tell you that, I will tell you about Margot's seeing UFOs, because the first time she saw the UFOs was in the 60s, and she was on board a ship called the Toscana. It was an Italian ship, and she and Wally used to go, not cruising as cruising is today, but they would go on a merchant ship, and the merchant ship would take so many guests, or whatever you want to call them. And so that's the way they saw quite a lot of the world. And it happened to be around about 6 o'clock one evening, and Margot was standing on deck. There were a few other people there as well. And suddenly, these two silver, moon-shaped objects were flying in the sky. Just like as big as the moon, as big as a big moon, just flying in the sky. And everybody came on deck, all the people who were sailing came on deck, and they looked at these things, and the captain suddenly came up and said, everybody down below, it's just the full moon, it's not, because everybody was saying it's flying saucers. It's just the full moon, he said. However, it wasn't the full moon. It was two flying saucers. So that was the first time she saw one. The second time was in the 80s, in the 1980s. I was out with her and Wally, and I was driving the car, and we were coming back from Shanklin, and she suddenly said, oh, look, there's a UFO. Well, of course, I couldn't look because my eyes were on the road. Wally was in the back of the car and didn't see it. And Margot was just, look, she said, look. Anyway, that was it. I stopped the car. I got out. Margot went to get out of the car. Her door was locked. She couldn't get out. That was that. No matter how she tried, she couldn't get out of the car. So anyway, eventually I drove home, and I said to Reg, Margot's locked the car door. I said, or rather, a UFO locked the car door, and you'll have to sort it. So that was that. And apparently this does happen. Sometimes the whole car stops and the engine stops and doesn't start until the UFO's gone away. So that was the second time she saw one. Now the third time I was with her, we'd been dancing at Broadway Park. Had a lovely dance floor, and Margot and I used to really enjoy our dancing. And we were coming out of the park and out of the Broadway Park, and there are trees all down the drive. And Margot said, "Oh, I've left something behind. I must go back." So she went back, and I was just standing there waiting for her. And suddenly I looked up, and coming out above the trees was this huge moon. I thought, my goodness, the moon's moving fast tonight. And then another one came, and they started dancing in the sky. These two silver, huge moon-shaped objects kept dancing in the sky, but they were behind a cloud. So although I saw them through the cloud, but this cloud was very peculiar because it had a completely straight edge, and they didn't come out from behind the cloud. And that was it. So Margot came out, and she's standing there looking at them, and some people came up the drive. And I said, "Look, look." And the man went, "Oh yes, UFOs, like that." And I thought, what's the matter? What is the matter? Wasn't he supposed to see them or what? "Oh yes, UFOs." Margot and I just roared with laughter, and they kept dancing, just as we'd been dancing. They were dancing in the sky behind this cloud. Anyway, we eventually got in the car and drove off, and we got to the viewpoint between Shanklin and Ventnor, stopped the car and looked over, and there they were. You could see them in the sky, still dancing around. Strange cloud. But there was a searchlight coming from Portsmouth direction, straight up to this cloud, and it was following these UFOs. And then a plane came following, looking at all these two UFOs. Anyway, we stopped and watched them. I got home and I said to Reg, "Margot and I have just seen two UFOs." I said, "They're over, you can see them above Shanklin and Sandown Bay." I said, "If we go on the top of the downs, we might catch sight of them again." And there happened to be someone else staying in the Grove with us, so Dave came as well. We all piled into the car and up onto the top of the downs, and there they were, still dancing around, still a searchlight from Portsmouth, and I don't know how long it went on for, but we left before they did. And it was just amazing because they were there for such a long time. And then the following day, Jane Taylor came through, and she said, "You know what you saw last night." It was UFOs. What you know as UFOs, the Starmen. So that was our three incidents of Margot's. Of course, she's seen lots of them besides that as well, but those were three important ones when something happened. And but it was a strange cloud formation. It was quite dark, the rest of the sky beneath this cloud was normal, but there was this very, very straight line, as if they'd drawn a line in the sky and said, "We're going to dance behind that." And that was it. So now I'll tell you some more stories. These are earthbound spirits that we rescued. And the first one is Edward, and we rescued him on the Jubilee Trail, which is the the trail up around Bryston and Calbourne. he said, "I fear I cannot divulge my real name, as I was a well-known personality. But for the records, you can call me Edward. I only believed in what could be proved. Therefore no God existed in my world. I am now between worlds, not a man, not a spirit, but an entity. It was an early evening when I came up here, and I sat overlooking the fields and the downs. I was on holiday and had driven up here. As I sat quietly, I heard a humming sound and saw a craft in the sky. Coming closer, it certainly was no aeroplane. It did not appear to look like a saucer. At that time, everyone talked of flying saucers. And incidentally, I refused to listen to such silly stories. I would say the shape was more like half a teacup. Yet that is of no consequence. The main thing is that I really did see a craft from another planet. It landed some way off from where I was sitting. No one came out of the craft. It appeared to have a tube coming out of it at a slow rate. The tube was about 1 foot in diameter and about 12 feet in length, rather like a long vacuum cleaner tube. It then withdrew itself into the craft, which then took off at some speed, quickly vanishing from my sight. The amazing thing was where the end of the tube had been, a small flowering bush that I had previously been admiring had disappeared. It was evident it had been sucked through the tube into the craft. I went off with my head buzzing for a logical explanation. There was none. I really had seen a flying saucer. I had been so rude to people who had talked about them, and had actually lost friends because of my closed and obstinate mind. When I died, quite naturally I might add, I had to wait until I could tell someone that craft from other planets really do exist. I had been wrong to laugh at it all. Now I may continue my journey to the next world, whatever it may have in store for me. I do thank you for your attention and for writing down all I have said. Goodbye and good luck. So there's another one. Of course, I believe in UFOs. I don't like what they're calling them today, UAPs. UFOs they will be and UFOs they will stay. Now this one was at Grammars Common. Now this isn't one that I actually went with Margot. Another friend of hers went with her called Jenny Gibbons. But it's another unearthly close encounter. So I thought I would read this one to you. Don't be frightened. My name is Jack. I boasted I was never frightened, yet I died through fear. I was a commercial traveller and visited the Isle of Wight for a few days every quarter. I'd been working around the Newport area. When I had finished, I had a meal. At this point, I would mention I was a teetotaler, so drink did not come into the story. I decided to drive out to the coast, exploring the country lanes. It was summer and light, and it was quite late. I left my car and climbed up here. I liked to sit looking at the open sky. It was starting to get dusk, and I wondered whether I would see a shooting star as I logged each one I saw. I was not married, not very fond of women. The sky was my hobby. This all happened a few months ago. Previously, in Newport, I had bought a beautiful piece of blue agate for my collection, my other hobby. I sat between the stile and the trees and saw a light, a shooting star, I thought. The sky grew darker as clouds rolled in, and I watched the light come nearer. I heard a humming sound. I was petrified as I realised it was a UFO, and got up and ran to the shelter of the trees. I dropped the agate as it was loose in my pocket. It should be easy for you to find, but that is not important except for its beauty. The UFO appeared to hover over where I had been. I feel sure they had seen me and were after me, but eventually they went off, and by then it was quite dark. Somehow I climbed down. I was shaking with fear. I left the island the next day. I felt so ill, with severe pains in my head. I was still shaking when I crashed my car halfway to London and was killed. I was so frightened I could not go through the tunnel towards the light. Instead, I was back here, hiding in the trees, guarding my piece of blue agate. Now I can go onwards, as you have all calmed my fear, and I know I am safe to go to the next world. Thank you for hearing me. Find my agate, and do not be frightened. Well, they found the agate, and the ghost was rescued, which was my life, really. This is what I spent doing 14 and a half years, rescuing ghosts. All very unusual, all very different, all with a story. And there was another ghost haunting the downs between Knighton and St Lawrence. And her name was Elizabeth. And we'd gone up, this was with my friend Aurea as well, we'd gone up to what was known as the bunker. It's an old bunker, and it's just behind a gate on the downs, just up the chute from Knighton. And it was just beginning to drizzle with rain, so it wasn't very comfortable. And there were masses and masses of sloe trees, which we were making our way through, when Margot heard this voice. I too came through the gate and looked around. I was on holiday staying at the hotel in Knighton. I walked up here one evening with a man I had met and rather liked. The weather was lovely, and as we explored, we realised it was getting dark. He had just given me a little keepsake as a goodbye present as I was leaving the next day. Suddenly, we saw a silver disc in the sky. It hovered overhead for about 10 minutes. We knew it was not an aeroplane. It went higher without making a sound. I left Knighton the next day to return home to the Midlands. In the excitement of seeing this strange disc, I dropped the keepsake. It is a little further on, by the bushes. I died 2 months later. I was not strong. I have been here ever since. Not long, really, although it seems like it. I knew it was a UFO we saw. Find my keepsake, please. My name is Elizabeth. I shall go on now to see who is waiting for me. Well, we did find it, and it was a little white and ginger-coloured stone. Always stones we were led to find. Over and over again we're given the importance of stones. And this is Ben. He was a fisherman. He liked fishing at night, and he'd gone to Chiltern Chine, and he was with his girlfriend Barbara, and they'd decided to go and do some fishing, and this is what he had to say. I used to fish at night. It was the best time, and I did it as often as I could in the summer. On this particular night, way back in the 1960s, I brought Barbara with me. We enjoyed fishing. About 5 in the morning, we left the beach coming up here on the cliffs to have a picnic breakfast. We had just eaten our bacon sandwiches when we saw a flying saucer right over our heads. It was quite frightening, as neither of us had ever believed in them. We watched for a few minutes as it hovered overhead. Then we gathered up our belongings. I grabbed Barbara's hand and we ran to where we had left the car. At first, the engine would not start. We could still see the flying saucer. Then it flew off and the car started without any trouble. We promised each other we would not mention this as people would only laugh, but this really did happen. When I felt in my pocket, all my loose change had gone. It was impossible to have dropped the lot. And Barbara, who had been wearing a bead necklace, realised this had gone as well. In the 70s, Barbara went off with another man, leaving the island, and shortly after I died. I found for some reason not clear to me that I was back on these cliffs. It was a flying saucer we saw, and I know they were responsible for my money and Barbara's necklace disappearing. There is still a 6pence on the cliffs by some flowers, and the clasp of the necklace. You may find them if you look by some flowers. I'm going now. I hear my name being called. Ben? Ben, you can come now. So I am going. Thank you for listening. I hope I did not frighten you. Well, we did find the 6pence and the necklace clasp by some flowers. The 6pence was a 1962 6pence, and the clasp was very small with tiny brilliants in it. And Margot wrote the comment, have the men from the stars, the beads and the rest of Ben's loose change, I wonder? And then we were driving to Freshwater one day and we had to stop at a certain point. There's a little car park just on the right-hand side, just before you go down the hill into the beach at Freshwater. It's by the golf course, and that's where we had to stop. And this is what we heard. My name is Bill. I dare not tell you my last name, as members of my family live around the West Wight. I cannot go onwards until I have told my story. I saw a flying saucer near the golf course. I was driving over the downs at 2 o'clock in the morning, returning home from visiting friends at Bryston. My car stopped for no apparent reason. The craft landed, and then within minutes it took off and hovered overhead for a while. After it had gone, I got out of the car, taking with me a torch, and went to see where it had landed. There was a slight scorch mark. When I reached home, I realised that 2 £1 coins I had in my pocket were gone. I returned to the spot the next day, and the scorch mark was there, but I did not see the coins. Yet now, in spirit, I can see them. You might like to find them to prove I am not a figure of your imagination. I did not tell anyone about my sighting. You know how people laugh. I had heard of you as someone lent me a book you have written. It was so interesting, and I know so true I have now found. Now see what you can find. Scorch marks, coins, or anything of interest. I feel so free now, as if I am released from some sort of chain that has kept me from going on. It is because you have listened to me, so I thank you, and I can go onwards in faith. And we scratched around in the stony, hard, chalky ground and found both £1 coins, one for me and one for Margot. So, and then she said, this is just Margot saying, the last of these spirits I will write about is Marion, a young lady who'd been out on the downs near the Longstone, which was the only megalith on the island. She too had seen a UFO and had been very scared. She had felt all the metal sucked off her body, hair clips, earrings, belt buckle and bracelet. She had seen her bracelet dropped from a height. After the UFO had flown off, she ran off, leaving the bracelet, never to return until she died, and she was haunting the area. Margot was able to release her with Walter and my help, and we found her bracelet. It had rather a pretty Eastern design. One item the men from the stars did not manage to add to their collection of earthly artifacts. Now, I have to tell you that Margot and I had in the bottom of Margot's house there was a basement, and we turned one of the rooms. It hadn't been lived in for years, ever since Margot had lived there. It had originally been the flat belonging to the owners of the house, two elderly sisters, and they lived there. However, it was very damp, and so Margot lived on the ground floor and this upstairs. And she asked us, or Spirit had asked us, if we would create one of these rooms to work in for psychic work and work with crystals and for healing. So Reg and I and a friend of ours had actually managed to do this room up completely, and then we used to hold meetings in there, and we'd invite people to come and listen or talk or whatever we wanted to do. But it was definitely for spiritual work only, this particular room. Anyway, my brother-in-law was coming to stay. That's my sister's husband, Robin's father. And we were told that a man of importance would be coming to see us. Anyway, what happened? Margot was told by her guides that Brian and she had actually lived on another planet and worked on this planet. They'd had 2 lives together. One, they were actually married or partners or whatever they were on that planet, and the other one they worked together. And this planet was called Ixolt, Ixolt. And anyway, that at that particular time, it was suggested that Brian perhaps would like to work with Margot, but he decided not to and turned it down. He did tell me many years later, by the way, that he wished he'd taken up the opportunity, but, you know, we make these choices. Choice is always ours because we live on the only planet of choice. What a mess we've made of it with our choices. However, I do have some information given to Margot by the men from Ixolt. And as Margot says, without Jane Taylor and Mary Anning, my psychic powers would not have been strong enough to receive these messages from aliens. So to these dear ladies who lived so long ago, I say thank you. And she said, as I was writing this last sentence, acknowledging their help, Mary whispered in my ear, Go to the footpath near Chillerton Mast and you will learn more. It was obvious to me that my contact with aliens was not quite finished. So the three of us set off as soon as it was convenient. We knew the place mentioned as she had rescued an earthbound spirit there some years ago. That was a very interesting spirit. It was an Australian. I will tell you about that another time. It was nothing to do with UFOs. It was to do with the fairies. Believe it or not. Anyway, sitting quietly, she said I waited. Then a strange voice sounded in my ear. I am from the planet Ixalt. Now I make contact. We have watched the movements on planet Earth for a long time, yet no one has realized this. There are others who watch, yet we are different. We cannot believe what we see. Cruelty to each other, cruelty to animals, and cruelty to the whole planet and the atmosphere. What was once beautiful is now ugly. On our planet there is great beauty, with no cruelty, no ugliness, no poisonous chemicals, and no oil, which is the worst kind of ugliness. We would like to land to meet your people, but we are afraid of the lack of love, and no doubt we would be treated with great cruelty. I know you as an individual are not cruel, nor the folk with you, but many people are in one way or another. You wonder how I speak your language. It is through a machine, and you are the only one with psychic power we could get through to, yet you cannot see us. Our craft is golden in colour, shaped like a tube with a flat top. Earthlings are ignorant compared to us from Ixalt. We do not have money and work as you do. Our way is more pleasant. We do what we wish without monetary gains. Everyone is equal, and there are no houses as you know them. I wished to be trained to become a captain of a spacecraft, whereas my father chose to grow crops. We are provided for from birth to death. We are perplexed at your uncomfortable way of life and the short period of time you have to live. You should all live longer, but you are your own enemies. You all, individually, kill yourselves. Our appearance is similar to Earthlings, yet we all have cream skins, whereas on Earth there are so many skin colours: black, brown, yellow, pink and cream. We never have our hair cut, as cutting it takes away strength and power. We never alter our decisions, so never change our way of life. The atmosphere on your planet grows more toxic every day. Centuries ago, our ancestors landed and survived. I doubt whether we would. I hope one day someone else from our planet will contact you. We do not have names. This is unnecessary. We are going now, but sad to see the cruel behaviour on Earth, the most wicked and ugly of all planets. Our power of travel will remain our secret. Farewell. Well, that's what they think of Earth. That's what they think of what we've done to Earth. And we're continuing to do it. Our leaders, so-called leaders, have no conception about how we should treat our planet, that we should husband the Earth, that we should love the planet, that we should live in nature. And all these things are being spoken to us by these aliens over and over and over again, and they will not listen. Because, of course, there aren't just these aliens, but there are the opposition as well. And it is the opposition, unfortunately, at this moment in time, that have the power over humanity. But the world is waking up, and the more we wake up and the more we realise that we have to balance. This is the question. We have to balance the negative and the positive. We're always going to have the negative and we're always going to have the positive, but we can't have it going one way or the other. And at the moment, it's very much leaning to the negative. And it is our job as light workers and light warriors and people with wisdom to balance this. And we balance it by shining our light. The light is information. The light is power. And it is the light that will bring us back into balance. That's just me ranting off again. However, I do have some more for you. I'm not quite sure what, but I will see. But I just love working with the men from the stars. They had so much to teach us, and they were such gentle with their reprimands, really. I have something here that I have marked for us. It's Francis Bamford. I know. Oh, this is a little bit to do with the synchronicity that happened. Yes, this was lovely. As I say, I went into the chapel, Francis Bamford Chapel, and there's this beautiful window with St. Francis of Assisi. And he's standing there with animals, little rabbits and birds in his hands, and it's just a beautiful window. If you ever get the opportunity to go there, go and see it. And so I'm standing there looking at this, and I'm looking at Francis of Assisi, and I'm thinking, what a beautiful, beautiful chapel this is. And everything that's gone on in here when Francis was alive. And so this was March the 30th, 1988, and it was just a short little conversation from Francis Bamford, and he said, "How nice to see you again, my children, and be able to shower you with God's blessings." We were very blessed. Animals are very important, and of course I have seen and been in contact with the other Francis you think of. I am always sickened by man's cruelty to animals, and if either of you ever wish to give to a charity, I would choose one that does good for our beloved four-legged friends. Now your work is continuing. I hope during the summer much more can be achieved and souls rescued. My blessing on all this wonderful work. Be careful with some folk, both of you, as sometimes it is best to keep quiet rather than speak. Now I must bid you farewell. One day we will speak again, not long, I hope. Bless you all. Francis of Assisi. Well, 2 days later, I went into our local charity shop. And what did I find? This little stone with St. Francis of Assisi on, and written underneath is for Francis for protection. I just love it. The synchronicities just keep happening. Bless you, Francis. And of course, Francis was quite aware that we were having conversations with, he said, "It has been some time since I spoke. It's very pleasing to see the two of you back here again. The third wishes to remain at home, which is wise for him. You are very blessed, hearing just not my humble voice, which is not important, but all those you have helped reach the light. I see much from where I am, and as each of these souls get close, I am able to reassure them that they have safely arrived at this level. And through your help, this has come about. I know you hear from another one from a distant planet. This too is interesting to you, and indeed the three of you. Keep faith, and you should hear again. So he knew what was going on in our lives. And he said, it's not that I see you all the time. He said, but I'm in connection with your own guides, and they know what's going on in your life, and they inform me. So everything we do is monitored. We all have guides. Some of us only have one, some have 2 or 3, and I've had some very interesting guides over the time I've been working. And it's lovely to know that they are working with you still, because that's what they're doing. They're impressing you, and you get impressions to do things, and that's your guidance. And if you do it, otherwise the impression keeps coming back, and eventually you do take note. That's what I wanted to tell you. It's not all I have to say today, because there's a second part to my information today. I've had some Robin, who I've worked with for 25 years now, who I worked with after I worked with Margot. I finished working with Margot in 1994, so there's a lot more stories to come that I did with her. But in 1995, Robin began channeling information, and his channeling has always been beyond the clouds, like cosmic channeling, and very, very interesting stuff. He was not comfortable with what happened to him, and for a long time he was very what shall I say? He wasn't really interested in what was coming through him. But luckily, I kept everything. I wrote everything down, everything, and transcribed everything. And so there is a lot of work that is coming from him. And later on, when computers came about, and I managed to get my hands on a computer, I checked out all the prophecies that Robin had been making in the years. I didn't get a computer till after 2000, when my daughter gave me an old one. And I've only recently been checking out the information that came through in 95, 96 and 97 and onwards. And everything he said has actually come about. So I have been able to prove to myself that what he is saying is legitimate. And just recently he has had some information, and I thought what I would do with the second half is read the information that Robin has given me. Now, he only gave it to me a few days ago. I had to transcribe it first of all, which was very difficult because he was playing it on his phone and I was picking it up with my voice recorder. So it was quite difficult. Anyway, I managed to put it all together, and I'm going to read it to you. There are quite some pages. And this is completely different from the work I've done with Margot, of course. And this was the first came through on July the 26th. And by the way, I hadn't got any ink in my printer, so I couldn't print it out, so I've had to write all these pages out by hand. We are here with a reference to many things. The world is a place that is inexplicably struck with so many different dilemmas at this point in universal time. You must insist on the energy of yourself and many others to transform what it is that is occurring. This transformation is words, thoughts, and patterns that are required for this planet to move into the next transition of its trajectory. We ask you, our communal being, and that communal being is the whole. The whole is about patterns and events and times, and the eucalypse in itself. The eucalypse. Eucalypse is part of what is transitioning at this point in time. Eucalypse basically means the trajectory of worldly patterns coming from a universal time, space, and occupational event. There are many things that people cannot understand at this point in time because nothing stays the same forever. I will talk about forever. Is that now? Is that yesterday? Or is it in the forward? It matters not what consists of forever. My children, my person, my people, we are forever. But our makeup is now, and the now is what makes us. And that us is the unique universal spectrum of powerhouses that project the thought patterns and the energy patterns out into the universe. Universal time is transitioning and changing as per expected. This is not a transition that has been suggested or part of biocomponents of planet Earth or the surrounding arena. This is a time in universal history. It is a little bit like a sieve. If you can imagine, the universe is being pushed through a sieve, and the fine sifting dust becomes, through those small holes, is the uniqueness of those energy forms that will process itself into a different part of another universe. The universe is splitting like an atom. You must understand that in this segmentation of the universe, there will be two components. A mitopic component. As the cell divides, so the universe divides. So people are divided. So thoughts are divided. This is the universal link to understanding what it is that is happening. It is as if you are being torn in half. Part of you is staying and another part of you is going. Which part of you will stay and which part of you will go will be down to how it is that you accept the filtration process, as we call it, the sieve. Civilization or decivilization. We, you, remark at this information. There is no point giving diverse thought patterns as to why this has occurred, what has brought this on, and why you have been brought to this point in universal historic time. That makes no difference. The significant difference is what it is one does from this point forwards. You, children of Earth, are all unique in one time frame, but you are so not unique in another time frame. Depending on how you look at that, you can transition from one time frame to another and stay unique or not unique or unremarkable. The unremarkable beings are those that cannot and will not raise their consciousness. They will stay as they are. This is not a threat. This is not anything untoward. What this is energy transitioning from one place to the other. Civilization is about the trajectory of man and his thoughts. Allow yourself to linger on this component. It is about man and his thoughts. Accept this with love. Accept this with tolerance. And accept this with one demarcation point. There is no more historical time left. This is the time of the gathering. This is the time of the change. Demarcation is behind you, my children. You are walking and witnessing a new world in its making. What part of that world do you push to be upon? The light or the dark side? That is all one needs to understand. The dark is not bad. It is just an unseen world where you cannot see as much as you think you would like. The light world is where you see and appear as you are, everything. Love is the true transition point. It is about doing what is right for everything and everybody, not only yourself. Be that love. Hold that love. And while you are in that love, understand that there may be others that cannot contain that. Bless you, my children. Do not be divided. Be as one. Thank you. Now that was the first one, which is quite deep. It's not for everybody to take on board, but for those who will understand it, it is very, very important. And the second one was August the 23rd. And addressing Robin. My dear child that speaks, this is the preliminary indication that changes are occurring, not only within, but to all those that cooperate within the unit of planet Earth and her surrounding intentions. You must understand that this information is given with love, and it is not here to indicate the level of fear contained within all those who choose to listen to other words. Words themselves are conduits to whatever it is that you wish to be part of. But what you wish to be part of is not always what happens to you. We have forgotten to isolate our mind and to indicate that the heart is the truth of all matters. We have forgotten to love. We have forgotten to give. We have forgotten to understand that truth is what it is that we are, not what we portray for others to see. We have to stand in our own truth and in our own light, and in consciousness we become what we can be, have always been, and might be, if we can only change the dial that is set in front of our eyes that says default. My children, default is not another setting. Default isn't about looking for others to give you an indication. Default is about going in an alternative direction, the one other than the thought pattern that you are having programmed in all your heads right now. disinformation or this information, depending on which way you choose to look at it, is an alteration of the parallels of thought within the veins of your brain. The veins of your brain do come from your heart, my child, my children, my people, but you listen in vain, or in truth, you do not listen at all. Consciousness was a human experiment to see where and what and how the divinity of thought can stretch itself, a little bit like an artist's palette, wandering with a blank canvas where a thought can be drawn in front of the eyes. There are many colours, many pastel shades, many lights and darks to be found on this canvas. But in truth, the canvas and the end result depends upon who paints. So look at yourself, the listener, the people, the person, as the painter of your own canvas. You have the divine opportunity now to step aside from the canvas that everyone else paints and draw your own. Draw your own conclusions as to what it is and where that you choose to go from this point onwards. What is happening, my children, is not genetic experiments. It is man's energy returning to meet him. This is not Big Brother. This is man's energy coming back to greet him. This is not disinformation from other units. This is man's mind coming back to him. It's about the right to go, yes, I may well have implemented these thought patterns many, many millennia ago, but my implementation has changed now. I do not wish to discredit other human beings by my discourse. What I choose to do is credit myself with the intellectual ability to change what it is that is going. Intellectual ability is one's ability to aspire to what the heart portrays. Intellect has nothing to do with the mind. The mind builds on what it is that you interpret through your eyes. But if your eyes produce other characteristics on a canvas and palette that you have drawn, then therefore you will glean what it is you think you need as opposed to what it is that you want. In truth, the human soul wishes for quietness, wishes for solitude, wishes for peace. But in truth, it wishes for love and ultimately community. The community of soul is the genetics that is sitting there quietly. That is how you originated, my children. A simple genetic structure that just gathered. Like a plant that gathers the insects to pollinate so it can reseed. Then it goes back to the ground and sows once again, and grows, slightly bigger next time, or slightly smaller, slightly to the left, slightly to the right. That consciousness was happy because it worked with nature and the domains of nature. The human quality is about expansion, expansion, expansion. Consciousness is about the development of opportunity. A plant with legs can go somewhere else, seed itself, and change its general characteristics. Maybe it was in too much shade and it wanted some sun. Maybe it was in too much wind and it wants some peace. Maybe it was too cold or too warm. With legs, it can walk. Consciousness has legs, just as you do. You are not the only conscious forms in this universe or on this planet, you human beings. But what you are is unique in one respect and one perspective only. You believe you were disconnected from everything else other than the unit you contain yourself within. You are not. All other plantation, all other institute of the mind has segregated itself off so far away from anything else in this human opportunity. You are, in truth, meeting yourself in reverse. You have caught up with yourself, and in so doing, you must gather your crop. You must harvest that crop and look at it all. And by coincidence, you have to work with merit to understand that you are meeting your energy in reverse. This is not Big Brother. This is not planetary sources. This is income and expenditure. An accountant always knows the balancing of books is important. The balancing of energy works in the same perspective. Yes, there are many other ramifications to this, but look at it as the balancing of the books. Humanity is balancing its books right now. Yes, it looks as if there is a false perspective, but there is not. There is love in all things. There is anger in many things. But understand that the creative process of knowledge has to be understood, and all things are often misunderstood because they are forgotten about when a constant movement is part of the componentization. Migratory frequencies of the origins are lost. You are not migratory beings, my children. What you are solitary beings on a journey, but you have forgotten what this journey was about. The journey was about heart originally, but the mind took over. And the mind has built so many things in the name of energy, but not in the name of consciousness. Consciousness and energy are divinely different. Consciousness is the original being's structure. Energy is something that is manifested from opportunity. Understand this. Opportunity has manifested itself in the form of energy, and energy and opportunity have overtaken what is deemed to be the conscious witness, and those that are awake at the planet at this point in time are conscious witnesses. They stand like the poles of the earth, like the gods of the universe, and they state, yes, we remember what it is that we were. We remember what it is that we can be. But at this moment in time, we are lost in the mire created by ourselves and by a mind that has become luxuriated in its own needs. At the point of death, you do not discard what it is you have become. At the point of death, you become unique in the perspective that you remember everything that you have been. You may not remember at that point, but you do have access to everything you have been. Just think of yourself on a train journey, but you got derailed and fell off a bridge into a very, very deep crevice. and you are climbing back out, and you stuck your head just over the top of the crevice, and you see where it is that you fell, and you realise that you were on a train journey, and the train is still laying on its side, and you are the only one who can put it back on its rails. That is your consciousness, my children, my people, my person. You need to rail your consciousness and rally your mind. Gather your heart and place your thoughts in the carriage at the back, realizing that the miscarriage of justice was down to your own unique actions, nobody else's. There is nobody to blame but yourself for what it is that is happening to you. You are part of every human being that is on this planet right now, be it small, big, large, angry, loving, caring, understanding, whatever it may be. We are all luxuriating in a big pot of soup, and that soup has been agitated and stirred to the point where it is turning at its unique point in time, turning round and round and round in a spiral until it has gathered momentum, until everything is in an inertia of form and waking up to what it is. But your mind will try and stop you. Understand that this anger you might feel for yourself and your actions of the past and present is only yourself looking at perspectives of what you have done. Do not stand to one side and say, I do not wish to look at these things. Accept what it is you have been, accept what it is that you can be, and understand the uniqueness. Step to one side and go, this cannot continue. And the only way it cannot continue is by not acting out the same process as before. Change what it is that you are. Step to the side, to the up, to the down. Do not carry on walking the same pathway. Do not implement the same unique structures. Change what it is you do. Love and alter your uniqueness. There is more to come, but less and less will be given. It is your time, my children, my person, my people, to understand that love is the key to all things. God bless you and thank you. And I think that will do for today, Sam. Very different. Very different. But, as I say, when I worked with Margot and we rescued all these souls are all hanging around the planet and they have got to go. They cannot hang around this planet anymore. They've got to go on to where they belong. And this is why it's so important to rescue these souls. Margot and my work was very, very important. And towards the end of my work with Margot, and we were working with the angelic realm, and not only the angelic realm, but the extra-terrestrial realm. And then I finished with working with Margot in 1994, when I went into a big void myself because there was nothing, everything finished. And it was a very hard time for me because suddenly everything that my life revolved around was gone. And it was because she chose to work with someone else. That was the reason. And the work that she was doing with someone else was certainly not conducive to the work that I did with her. But the amazing thing was that we were working with extraterrestrials at the very end of the work with Margot. And the moment Robin started channeling in July 1995, the first words that came out of his mouth were, "We are not of this planet. We are from the planet, we are the elders from the planet Zor." and we are so concerned for your planet. Over and over again, it was almost as if Margot finished, Robin started, and we were back on the same track. There's no going back once you know these things. There's no going back to being an ordinary man in the street. You can't possibly, not with your mind full of all this information. And it has to be shared. We have to realise that, there is a point at which we've come to now that we could destroy ourselves unless we balance the planet. There is no going back. And as one of the extraterrestrials told us, 2 of their planets in their system had blown up. I'm convinced that the asteroid belt is a blown up planet. However, we shall go on to more lighter things next week again, when I shall tell you some more of the lovely Earthbound that we did together. May God be with you all.